Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And today we are thrilled to be joined by columnist and associate editor at the Boston Globe and now podcaster, Shirley Leung. Welcome.
Hi.
We are so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, we were just having a conversation about technology and weather, as is typical, before we start recording.
I know. I'm getting Atlanta weather up here in Boston. We are not used to it.
I mean, one of the things working from home, honestly, we're not really used to Atlanta weather either. But my closet gets really hot and I can't have the AC running because it interferes with the audio. So I had to come up with some pretty creative ways to cool down.
How do you do that? Do you put ice on the floor?
Ice packs.
Oh, really?
Yes. I'm also embarrassed to say I don't do this, but I did used to. You can put underwear in the freezer and then wear it.
All right. Anney, I don't know if we know each other enough to say that.
That's
TMI.
I'm trying to break some ice right here.
Welcome to the family, Shirley. Exactly. Apparently, we are now offering all the secrets.
Yeah, when you bring in underwear.
I'm just, I feel like we're going to be friends. So I'm just
She's going to go ahead and lay it out there. Need you to know random fact about her sometimes.
I don't do it anymore, but I did try it. It did work.
Did it? Like, I have so many questions, but I don't feel like this is the appropriate episode. We'll come back to this later, Anney.
Well, yeah, later. And unrelated to that, we are having a conversation about women, I guess kind of related, women in work and burnout and things related to that. But first, Shirley, could you introduce yourself to our audience?
So my name is Shirley Leung, and I have been a journalist for 20 years at the Boston Globe. I've done a little bit of everything. I've been a reporter, I've been an editor, and now I'm a columnist and a podcast host. My podcast is just turning 1, so I'm a podcast baby compared to you guys. And then the podcast is called Say More. And I launched a column a little more than a decade ago because I wanted to shine a spotlight on the lack of women in corporate boardrooms. And I just figured that if you could write it with, when I say column, meaning I can have an opinion, right? So I felt like with an opinion voice, having a voice in a column, writing about a topic like that, I could get a lot more done. And of course, if you think about a dozen years ago, not a lot of people were talking about this topic. And of course, today, everybody is talking about, the lack of women in boardrooms, the lack of women in leadership. So I kind of hit it at the right moment, writing about that topic. And I've brought it into diversity in the workplace. And my podcast is, I interview, it's a weekly podcast, and I interview guests in and around Boston about their ideas, because, we're Boston's known for our big ideas.
For sure.
Yes. And we do want to talk about the podcast, definitely. And congratulations on your year anniversary.
Thank you.
But before we talk about that, I was wondering if you could tell us, because I was listening to some interviews with you about how you got into journalism and then how you kind of transitioned into editing and then now podcasting. And it's a long time interest that you've had of telling stories, correct?
Yes. So I have been writing and being a journalist since I was like 15 or 16 years old in high school. And I kind of just really curious about the world. Though, frankly, in the beginning, I thought it was really cool to see my name in print, to see my byline. And so it's like, oh, this is so cool. And I thought it was really cool to interview the high school principal and grill him. And then, so I did it in high school, and then I went to college, and I wrote for the college paper. And then I was thinking, oh, I got to find a summer job. And then I just applied for a summer internship, and I kind of just stuck with journalism by accident, but I've loved it. I've been able to see much of the country. I grew up outside of Baltimore in Maryland, and I did an internship in New Orleans at the New Orleans Times-Picayune. And then I went to Chicago, the Chicago Tribune, and I've worked for the Wall Street Journal in Los Angeles and in Chicago, and then I've been in Boston for 20 years. And I love. I've been the business editor at the Globe, and I managed people. Then I've was the interim editorial page editor as well, and but I really love writing columns. I love having an opinion. I actually didn't think I would like column writing. If you guys have a little time, I have a funny story about how I became a columnist. I was the business editor at the Globe at the time, and the new editor of the Globe at the time wanted another business columnist. And so I was in charge of the search to hire another business columnist for the Globe. And I looked around. I didn't really follow columnists at the time. And so I decided, I read a lot of people. I after a few months, I kind of gave up. I couldn't find anyone. And then one day I said to myself, I said, you know what? I think I could do it. I know all the players in town. I think I could, if asked, I think I could have an opinion on something. I mean, I like to say I pulled a Dick Cheney, right? I was in charge of the search.
I'm glad that's what you're saying and not some other thing.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. I was in charge of the search, and then I appointed myself. And so, and it's been a great experience. I mean, one of the reasons I decided, even though I love being a manager and I loved editing, there are not a lot of female Asian journalists, columnists. I mean, I knew if I did it, you could probably count the number of Asian women writing columns in the U.S. on one hand. Mm-hmm. And so, and I still think there's only still probably a half a dozen of us at the major papers. And so I just knew that it's a voice that needed to be out there. And I'm just glad that my editors at the Globe agreed with me. And so I've been doing this now for, almost 12 years now.
Which is awesome. And yeah, honestly, when you look at for any field, including podcasting, the amount of Asian women that are in as hosts is so low.
Oh,
the
really?
number is so low.
Yeah, I believe it.
For women hosts in general, for podcasting is ridiculously low, especially compared to the amount of women who actually listen to the podcast that make up the audience.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
It is significantly lower than you would think.
Yeah.
And then when you look at and you put into Asian podcasters, I'm like, hey, welcome to the family. I'm glad to see you here, Shirley.
I know. There's a trade group, right? There's like an Asian podcasting trade group. You know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I just found out about them a year ago. It's like, wow, there's enough of us. I think there's a few hundred.
Yeah. So I don't know if we're talking about the same one, because I am a member of a group that I silently watch from afar, they do meetings and awards. I'm like, yes, let's do this. So I do. We'll have to trade secrets later.
So I spent most of my career in print, and then when I launched the column, I decided that I wanted to be multi-platform. I wanted to go on TV. I wanted to do radio. And because the media market is so fractured now, to have true impact, you need to go on multiple platforms. And so a decade ago, I started as a weekly guest on our local NPR station here in Boston, GBH. And so I'm a weekly guest on a very popular radio show called Boston Public Radio. And so I'm on for half an hour. I talk about my columns. I talk about business stories and topics. And so that's really how I got interested in audio. And then in the last few years, I was thinking, I'd love to do a podcast. And I have to say, I was not a podcast listener, until the pandemic. And so when we were all working from home, trapped at home, I began walking the dog in the afternoon. That was my, assignment. Usually, my husband usually did, but now I was like, no, I need to get out of the house. I need to get away from my computer. I'm going to walk the dog. And that's when I started listening to podcasts, and I really enjoyed them. And so, and as you know, a lot of print journalists now are doing podcasts, and so they're kind of making that leap. And so it's hard though. It's hard to build an audience. I really. I don't know how you guys do it. I mean, it's kudos to you for building an audience. I mean, that is so hard to do, especially when you're not part of like a a big network, you're kind of doing it on your own. I mean, you are, but like, what I'm saying? Like it's your startup,
Right.
that's hard,
Right.
And
I will say we were very blessed, I guess, fortunate to have people who already created that base for us. Who one of them, Caroline, was from the print journalism world as well. She was from a small newspaper, jumped into podcasting as well. So right along with you. I do have to ask, what do you see as some of like the big differences and or better or good coming from print to podcasting?
I mean, they're so different, and I've learned so much working with my producer over the past year. And, the questions I ask as a journalist, I was told very early on, Shirley, the questions you're asking, these are print journalist questions. You were aiming to get information out of people. That's not the purpose of the podcast. You want to ask questions to get your guests to tell stories, to kind of exhibit emotion, and you're not looking for answers all the time. And so you got to find that right mix, and so it's been really eye-opening to kind of go to see what are good print questions and what are good podcast questions.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what print questions look like because I've never been in that. I was like, that's such a different look and like what you're talking about and how you like go forward with things. I'm also very not great at writing. So it's a good thing I stay away from printing. Like we'll just keep it there. I'm obviously more a podcaster. Anney just puts her head down. Just saying. But
no comment. Look, Annie's no comment.
Annie's an actual writer. I'll give her that. Like she does an amazing.
Wait,
she
did
does
you guys write a book together?
We did. We had a lot of help. We had a lot of help. I had a lot of help.
You can get it wherever you get your books.
But even with the books, that's different from like actual doing media and doing newspaper articles and columns. I feel like it's such a different world.
It is different. It's very different. And I still feel my comfort zone is still writing. I mean, the one thing about doing the podcast, it takes away from writing more columns.
Yeah.
And there's so many topics to write about and in Boston. And so I miss that.
Yeah. Speaking of, can you kind of talk to us about this podcast, about your 1-year-old podcast?
So we did this 4-part series on burnout called Beating Burnout. And it started out as, I was just, when I think of myself right now, coming out of the pandemic, I've been on this kind of, I don't know, it's like a 2-year quest to kind of feel like my old self. And now that we're 4 years out of the beginning of the pandemic, I'm like, maybe I can never get back to being my old self. But how do I get a little closer? And something changed for me, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And I just remember in 2020, we're all working from home. I was on deadline a lot. My kids were home from school, or in Massachusetts, a lot of the school systems by the fall of 2020, they were on this crazy hybrid system. They would go to school for 2 hours, Monday, Wednesday, like Friday in the morning. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, they would go in the afternoon for 2 hours. And I mean, you needed like I don't know, it was like a part-time job, just keeping track of their schedules, And meanwhile, I actually set my column aside and told my editors, very early on in the pandemic, it's like, I don't think people want to know my opinion right now. I think you need help covering the news. And so I said, because as much as COVID was a public health crisis, it was also an economic crisis. My wheelhouse is business reporting. And so I ended up writing about all the jobs that were lost and all the restaurants that were closed. And then after they were closed, they had all the reopening. And so it was one of probably the biggest news story of my career. And so it was so busy. And I just remember I just remember by the fall of 2020, I was pretty burnt out. And that was a time when you're at work, you actually started, maybe before you never told your bosses you were burnt out, but now it was okay. It was okay, and actually welcomed that you say you're burned out, because everybody's going through the same thing. And so I did this series to figure out, how do I get back to feeling like work isn't work anymore? And that was kind of my North Star, to figure that out. And so that's why we launched this series. We talked to a Harvard Medical School doctor. We talked to Cal Newport, who's a productivity expert. We talked to Krista Tibbett, who's the host of On Being. And then there's another local person who lives in Western Mass, Emily Nagalski, she was interesting. She's a sex educator. Then she became a burnout expert. And how that came to be is that when she wrote her first book on sex, her whole thing is helping women feel more confident about their bodies. And so she's on her book tour, and she said the number one topic when she went on her book tour was people were saying, that chapter you wrote about burnout, the relationship between sex and burnout, and that was the most important chapter of the book for many of her readers. And so she just knew that there was a good topic here. And so she ended up writing a book with her sister about burnout.
Yes, you have so many fascinating guests on the show. And I do want to come back to some of the things that you specifically look into in episodes, and also more about burnout, obviously. But a couple of things before we get into this. One of the things I thought was interesting when I was researching this, reading into this, was that you talk about the stress paradox, which I find fascinating. And especially during the pandemic, when a lot of us were isolated in one way or another. Can you describe what that is, please?
So the stress paradox is this idea that everybody is stressed out, right? But nobody wants to admit it, right? And but I think during the pandemic, it was okay. It was, and because everybody was going through it, the CEOs down to the rank and file workers. And if you think about COVID, was this collective experience that we all had. And unless you were 100 years old, you never experienced it before, right? And so it was all uncharted territory for so many people. So, in the beginning, I think it was very isolating, right? That everybody goes through it. It was very isolating. But I think towards maybe, I don't know, by the end of 2020, it was okay to talk about it. It was okay to talk about how stressed out and burned out we all were during the COVID, and employers were doing something about it.
Yes. It is interesting how it's become just accepted. Like, a lot of times when we all start a podcast now, we'll say, "Oh, how are you?" And the other person will be like, "Eh."
I know, it's this feeling of blah, right? I mean, I feel better after going through this, burnout series. I actually use a lot of tips, to help me get rid of the blahs, or at least understand the blahs. That almost makes me feel better about the blahs.
Right. I find it fascinating when you were talking about trying to get back to your old self pre-COVID, pre-lockdown, because for me, and I think Anney and we talk about this all the time, especially because when we go out and doing things with groups and such, I am naturally an introvert, but then going through the pandemic, I was like, yeah, I'm retreating into myself and never want to come out again. And doing so causes me social anxiety, or just pure out anxiety. And for me, in my head, it's like, this is the new norm for me, as well as the fact of like, maybe this is part of aging. Maybe this is me, going into my whatever next steps in life is, but never really considering that there's a possibility of trying to get back to pre-pandemic. So I find this concept very interesting. Did you have a lot of discussions, and have you felt like you've gotten closer to that pre-person?
I mean, I feel like I have adjusted my expectation. I think, I would say 2021, 2022, even 2023 is like, how do I get back to my old self? And now I'm thinking, I don't think I can go back to that kind of my old self, at least not every day. Mm-hmm. Maybe there will be days I feel like that. But Samantha, I also think a lot about the pandemic changed me. Right. It changed my view, and it is, I'm getting older. I saw a lot of death. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of And also, I saw a lot of people retiring and doing something completely different with their lives. And so I think I'm, and my kids, they're getting older, they're, I have an 11-year-old and 13-year-old now. And so now I can imagine them at an age where they're not here with me anymore. They're out of the house. So I'm very more mindful that these are incredibly stressful time to be a working parent. But these days won't last. These days will go by really fast, and I will miss my crazy, chaotic working mom life. And so I'm trying to kind of soak it all in and enjoy it, and I'm trying to find the right balance. And Samantha, I'm so glad you brought up this idea of, because I feel like I used to go out to a lot of events. I like talking to people, but now it's kind of exhausting.
Right. That's exactly what we say. Like, what happened? We used to be okay with this. Now we're all struggling and having a normal conversation face to face.
Right. I was like, I got to put on makeup. I got to put on real clothes. I got to leave the house.
Oh, I have to shower? Okay.
I have to shower.
Great, I guess.
I was like, what? So now it's like, oh, wow, this is so much work. And so it's hard. It's hard to get out. And one of the things I also notice is that, when I go to the office now, our policy at the Globe is 3 days. They would like people to be in the office 3 days a week. And that's actually, pretty good. A lot. When you go to other workplaces, sometimes it's only, it's pretty empty. But when you go into the Globe newsroom, it's actually, it feels busy. And, but when I go to the Globe newsroom now, I mean, I can't work. I mean, people are talking to me. It's like, why are you talking to me? I need to work. I can't concentrate anymore. Yesterday, I was trying. So I used to be able to sit in the office and write stories. And now I try to write at home because I need full concentration. But sometimes you can't avoid that. Yesterday, I was on deadline. I had to write in the office. And so I had my AirPods on. And then on top of my AirPods, I had my noise canceling earphones.
You had all the things.
And people were still trying to talk to me.
You need like a don't disturb sign.
I do.
Police tape.
Oh, police tape. That's a good idea. Someone said I should put up because I also sit, I recently got moved at the office, and I sit in a high traffic corridor.
No.
That's a curse.
So I think I might write a whole column about that. Do you have any advice if you I mean it's like I feel like I'm in like Times Square. Like there's so many people talking to me and walking around, and someone said I should put like screens up, like I don't know, or a wall of plants, tall plants. I was like,
you're like in the jungle in a resort.
Exactly.
That's even better.
I like that.
So it's very hard. So that's also very confusing to me because I'm supposed to be in the office. I'm supposed to be working and concentrating, and I can't always do my best work when I'm in the office. It's like, well, that's so strange to me now.
Yeah. Before we moved offices pre-pandemic, the office was for our podcasters, all the podcast people. It was open concept. But everybody had their own stations, but it was so quiet. It was one of the quietest places I'd ever entered in my life, that it was unnerving, that I just looked around and all you could hear was clickety-clack, and it would be full. Everybody would be there. But I was like,
really?
They know how to work. I will give them that.
Wow. Yeah. I would love that. Clickety-clack. No, that's not. No.
I did have another question, because you specifically have this understanding of what it is to have children in school during the pandemic, as well as a full-time, very demanding job. How did you balance all of that? Because one of the things that we had talked about soon after we were releasing episodes about the pandemic was the amount of women who had so much on their plate that they ended up having to give up something in order to balance everything out, and then feeling so burnt out because of that, and or also unfulfilled because of having to let something go. For you, as someone who's pretty much in high demand in your field, what was that like working through that? How did you survive without burning out? Or if you did, how did you survive that?
I mean, when I look back, it's like, I don't know how I survived that period.
That's amazing.
I just remember, I tell this story. I had a colleague who was teaching a journalism class, and she asked me to speak to her class. And we were talking about, working during the pandemic. And then her journalism students had to write, a story off of, my presentation or my talk to the class. And she said, everybody started with the same lead, which is, the lead is the first graph or the first anecdote. And I told this story about how I was on deadline yet again for another page one story. And it's like 5 o'clock and one of my kids comes up, and he's probably like, I don't know, 7. He's like, I'm hungry, Mom. And I'm like, I'm on deadline. My editor has said, he needs the story now. I'm like shoving potato chips in his face. I was like, you're like, why are you hungry? Oh, wait, it's dinner time. Here, just have potato chips.
Right.
And so I think I scared a couple people away from becoming a journalist. But yeah, part of the sacrifice was your family, and I didn't, even though my kids we were all home together, I didn't get to spend as much quality time with my kids because I was working a lot. Though the upside was we always had dinner together. Most nights of the week, because the restaurants were closed, you didn't go out. So at least we had dinner more times, at home together than I could ever remember. And so, but it was hard. And, and I'm just glad that by the end of 2020, I recognized that I could not, something needed to change. I would say by 2021, I took more breaks during the day. I took more walks. I didn't used to, count how many steps I have. Now I make sure I have 10,000 steps a day, because that can be hard to do if you're working from home. And now through this burnout series, I'm learning to breathe more. I'm learning to slow down. I think that's been the next phase. And I'm learning to, one of the things I learned is that what the doctors call a new kind of burnout that's happening from all this, from the pandemic and from working from home. It used to be the classic symptoms of burnout. Used to be, you're exhausted, you can't get out of bed, you don't feel like working, right? You're tired. The new burnout is you can't disconnect from work. You are on all the time, whether it's your phone, your laptop, Slack, text, Facebook, you just can't disconnect. You are on, your mind is going 24/7. And if you think about the tech companies, they've designed their software, they designed their hardware to make you addicted. And so you have to be mindful of that, especially those of us who are working from home more days than going into the office or leaving their homes.
So what was some of that advice? Because we need that.
Might relate too hard to that one.
It may have been speaking too loudly.
But so do you guys both work from home full time?
Yes. And because we are podcasters who have 5 to 6 episodes a week that we have to be constantly on, when we don't watch anything for fun, we watch it to be like, oh, this could be this could be this.
Right.
Which is why you'll find our podcast is like all over the place with books and movies, because we have to find, and not that there's not enough, there is, but it has to have also mean there has to be enough information, which is sometimes lacking. So for us, even when we're not working, even though we may not be recording or even writing, we're constantly thinking about it. The amount of social media I consume, and then I'm like, okay, this is podcast. I literally have sections called podcast ideas because I have to save it and then do research to see if it's viable. But I know like Annie's done this for multiple more years than I have, but constantly where it never leaves us. So this level of burnout is very real because also we want to be relevant and we want to have integrity in what we deliver. But sometimes it's hard to like feel like we're doing that when we're always on.
Right. And I used to be one of these, until this burnout series and talking to these experts, I used to be what both of you are doing. You feel like I just need more input, right? More input equals more output, right? And I learned, I talked to this guy named Cal Newport, who is an MIT trained computer scientist. And he was probably my favorite guest, but well, because I'm when you think about it, those of us who love to multitask and get a lot done, and especially for you guys doing 5 or 6 episodes a week, and who knows what else you're doing, right? And his whole idea is that working more and being productive, we've kind of become addicted to just working, and when what we really need to be doing is to measure our productivity by the quality of the output, And so he was saying, he had like 3, I love his mantra. He's written books on the topic. He has a podcast, the whole thing. And the 3 things that he talks about a lot is to do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality. And so I think about that a lot. And he's interesting. He's interesting because he's a working father. He has 3 kids, maybe 3 sons, 3 boys, all school age, young, elementary school, maybe middle school. And so he started on this productivity quest. How can I work less and do more? Because I want to spend more time with my kids. And you don't hear that a lot from dads. And so he kind of built all of this so he can spend more time with his family. And he's really thought about it. He's interesting because he's a computer scientist. He loves technology, he understands technology, and his whole field of research is how technology is really, we're addicted to it, and we're not. This generation, and we're not used to kind of unplugging. We're not used to functioning, and I guess his whole thing is like, for example, he tells me when I'm working, when I need to do deep thinking, like I'm working on something and I need to really concentrate, make sure your phone is in another room. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your texts. We even talked about spaces, because I was telling him, I can't work in the office and I can't work from home either. I don't know about you guys, but now working from home, I'm so distracted. I think about laundry all the time. I think about the dirty dishes, right? Mm-hmm. And then during the summer, some of my kids are, teen and tween. They don't always want to go to camp. So they just like, their favorite thing is to just stay home and do nothing, which then that means I'm the lunch lady, and then I'm the dog walker in the afternoon, right? And so it's like, when am I going to get my real work done? And so, anyways, so he coined something called work from near home. Mm. He thinks that's the future of work. He's at, Georgetown University, so we were recording virtually. And I said, where are you talking from right now? It's like, I'm talking from this office space that I've leased in the little town I live in. And I was like, oh my God, you really are working from near home. And then I started Googling, and I realized, like, even in my town, my little suburban town, there is I can lease office space, for $200 or $300 a month, kind of I guess almost like the WeWork concept has come to the suburbs. And then when I started asking other people who, have their own businesses, kind of PR consultants or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing that. I was like, oh, maybe I need to jump on that.
Yeah. Have you?
I have, and I'm thinking about, because I'm also cheap. And so
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm also cheap.
Mhm.
You guys, and I mean, I don't even join a gym because I'm like, I'll never go to the gym enough. I'm
It's
just
not
going
worth
to
the
walk.
money. Yep.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's actually, when I think about joining the gym, it's like, should I
Cost
rent,
efficient.
should I also rent office space of my own? So he was interesting. He was saying that that's what employees should do.
Mm.
They should give that as an option
Oh,
to people, because you might get higher quality work
right.
from your employees because they're not at home doing laundry
Right.
and thinking about laundry. They're in a special space, associated with work. And I guess the upside is you're not bombarded. Like for me, like you don't have colleagues talking to you all the time.
Right.
But I know I feel bad because I love my colleagues. I love the
But that's
newsroom.
why.
I love it. Right. One of the best perks is working in a newsroom and talking to all these people and learning all these
Right.
different stuff and chit chatting. But I find like because I'm not used to being in the office, I can spend my entire day going from desk to
Right.
desk. It's like one big cocktail party,
Yeah.
except we're not drinking cocktails. It's like water, and coffee.
I mean, that was definitely a pre-pandemic thing. I'm like, if just because I'm at the office, I'm on the clock. It doesn't even matter what I'm
Yeah.
producing. But if I'm at home, I have to prove to you what I'm doing. Now that we work from home in a different manner, it's a little different attitudes. But pre-pandemic, that's what I would used to think. And be like, if I'm out at home working, I have to prove to them this is worth me working from home. But if I'm at the office, I'm a socialize with my coworkers because I like them and I'm here. See, I'm here.
Well, that's my life now. If I don't have to get any work done, I love being in the office.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. It is.
It's your adult socialization time.
It is.
Oh, wow.
Anney. They always come talk to you.
Look.
So do you ever leave your podcast studios and
Never
homes
leave
and-
this closet. No, I'm just kidding.
It's rare.
You must do events. So that's your time out, right? To do events.
Sometimes we have to do events. The way that they have set up the new office, they have a lot more. They do have a lot of studios, but we have like 180 podcasts. I think in Atlanta alone. So
Wow.
Getting studio time can be like they encourage you to come, but it's not necessarily possible for everyone to be there.
Yeah.
And again, as we are now homebodies, I think I've been to the office 3 times since they've opened, as well as the fact that we recorded twice there.
I mean, I have to say, it is so remarkable, the technology to be able to record from home. And we have a tiny podcast studio at the Globe. I mean, it's actually hard to fit 3 people in there, Yeah, we just recorded something and we had 4 people in the studio. It was really cozy. And so, I mean, it's the size of a closet, but 4 people in there. And so a lot of times my producers like just record at home.
Yeah.
I've got a mic. I've got a laptop.
You've
I've
got a
my
background.
premix. I got a background,
That's amazing.
I got my circle light.
Yes.
We love technology.
So,
honestly, because of the pandemic, we realized, that's as long as we have the equipment, we're good.
Yeah. I'm just so I'm sure it's like amazing. Everybody, that's why everyone can do podcasts, right? I mean, you can set up your own radio station at home. Basically, it's amazing.
It is. It's amazing. And again, this is also the problem with Anney and I. Are like, we never stop. There's no reason to stop unless we are physically unable to. That kind of any excuse kind of goes out the window.
Yeah, I was recently on. You've touched on a lot of questions I've written already.
I hate when that happens.
No, it's good. It's good. I think we can tease apart some more things.
I have more things to say.
Oh yes,
So
yes. And this might be. Some of these are kind of like my stream of consciousness. So we'll see if it even resonates with anyone else. I was recently on vacation and my friends I was working and they all kind of came up to me and they were like, I'm jealous of your job in a lot of ways, but I really like that I clock in, clock out, and I'm not doing what you're doing. And I was just thinking about it because that's always been the case since I started this job. But I was thinking about the beginning of the pandemic and we were having conversations about what this is going to look like. What are we going to do? And all kinds of ideas were getting thrown around in the beginning. And a coworker friend of ours, we had a meeting, and she kind of was very adamant, like, I need to work. Do not take the work from me, because that's how she handled her stress of the pandemic. It was like a distractor. And I feel like I do that too. I get stressed and I'm like, you know what I could do? I could work on something and it will distract me. And I feel I've seen that with a lot of my women colleagues, less so than men. But now it feels like we're all tired. And we're all like, okay, I want, maybe that part of my brain that shouldn't be working right now wants to work, but I'm so tired I can't do it right now. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about the work-life balance for if you have kids, which was huge during the pandemic and caused a lot of women to drop out of a lot of like academia and things like that. But, you know, I don't have any kids, and I'm also just like, how do you balance things, I guess is what I'm saying, when you're kind of defining your worth through work, which is an unhealthy thing that I feel like the US is kind of bad about, and you're just stressed. I'm asking you for therapy. I'm sorry.
You've already provided quite a bit, so might as well keep going.
Oh, you shared me your underwear.
I did right away.
You're right.
She needs you to see her, so here we go.
I mean, I do feel like the pandemic has really forced me to have priorities, to make priorities, you know, and I think I'm at a point where I just have to think about what's important to me. And I think I've decided after going through this pandemic is that my North Star right at this moment is to see my kids grow up and be part of their lives at this age. Because one of the things that people don't tell you, I don't even have kids, but you'll appreciate this, is that when there's a sense that when they're babies, you feel like they need so much attention and you need to give a lot of yourself to your babies. But then you realize as they get older, they actually need you more now when they're actually walking and talking and they're going through these middle school years or teen years. That's when they actually really, really need mom and dad. Because when they're babies, you can outsource a lot of stuff, or you could just, I mean, you get through it, but you can't outsource a lot of the parenting as they get older. So you actually need to spend more time with your kids. And I decided I don't want to go crazy. And so I'm kind of making choices. I mean, I'm still ambitious, and I feel like I think the cost for me is that I'm really hard on myself. I'm really like, oh, look, so-and-so did this, and of course I know like they're also not dealing with some of the stuff I'm dealing with, and so they have a little more time to do X, Y, and Z, but I try to think about it as my kids won't be here for that much, it's maybe it's another like 4 or 5 years of grinding it out, in this work life, trying to balance out parenting. And then after that, I have all this time to kind of go a little faster. And I guess you just have to make that decision. I mean, we did a bonus episode of the Burnout series called the Founding Members of the No Club. Have you heard of this club, the No Club?
No.
Oh my God. They are so amazing. They're 4 academics around Pittsburgh. And they started, I don't know, maybe a 7-8 years ago. And they were just, academics, working moms, and they were just overwhelmed. And they decided, and they were like, economists and other researchers, and they decided to meet monthly over drinks at a restaurant and talk about like, what do I do? I'm always burnt out, and why does it affect women? They kind of came up with this idea that women in the workplace, we tend to do what they call the non-promotable tasks. We mentor people, we throw the retirement parties, we do all these things that take away from work that will make the firm money. And so as a result, we don't focus on the promotable tasks. And so, and they did this research showing that women always say yes. They tend to say yes. And other women know women say yes. So they tend to ask other women to do certain tasks as a result. And so now I'm learning to say no more, a lot more. And that has helped a lot. And to kind of focus on saying yes to things that will further my career or further, my time with my family. Because I'm learning that women were hardwired to say yes.
Right.
We just are. And there was this one story about one of the professors. She was looking at her schedule and she's got this committee and this task force to be on, and she's counseling this graduate student, and she has no time to do research. And so she compared her schedule to another academic, and his schedule was completely free. He had 7 hours to do research because that's what will get him promoted. That's what will get him, on tenure. And she's like, what am I doing wrong here? So you got to learn to say no more, Anney, and think about what matters to you. What else you could be doing, besides working.
This is hilarious because before the pandemic, I was like the person who did the parties. I was the usually I wasn't the one who secured all of the stuff, but I was like the one. And then after the pandemic and we were starting to hang out again, I got contacted by somebody who was trying to let's get people to office again. And I was like, oh no, I'm tired. Oh gosh.
So did you stop doing parties?
Well, I'll say I'm in between learning to say no, and now I've gotten better at saying no one will come because Atlanta traffic sucks.
Oh.
So I've found an excuse that equates to no, but it wasn't a no.
She kind of ghosts sometimes, where she's like, "I'll think about it," and then just never.
Well,
really
right.
respond.
But that's a good tactic. Never say yes in the first 24 hours.
Right.
Sleep on it.
Oh,
that's
yes.
a good. Yeah, that's good. And so for example, the other day I had an assignment I had a 3:00 assignment, and I had to debate whether or not to take my kid to basketball at 5:30. Like a special clinic, and it involved travel and during rush hour. And I was thinking, oh, maybe I could do it. Maybe I could do it. And I'm so glad I said no. Because it ended up taking me an hour. My assignment ran long. I ended up not getting home till 6:00, in traffic. And so it's like, imagine if I had said yes. And then I would have been whole nother stress level. And so you just have to learn to say no a lot more and carve out time for yourself.
So I'm wondering about this. There was a time, maybe 2 years into the pandemic, when we started getting emails that was very much like kind of judgy about, prove your work productivity and all this stuff. And I feel like I had a lot of conversations with people around the time where we were working more than we were overcompensating.
Yeah.
As you said, maybe the quality wasn't the same because we're all stressed and being overworked, but we were working. And I have an app where I do clock in and clock out. And I was like, no.
Oh, that's great.
I got the receipts, my friends. But sort of related to planning of parties, always saying yes, I feel like there might be a shift happening. Because we're talking about burnout in a lot of different ways, right? Not just work. We're talking about a lot of different things where now we're not as willing to obscure the other stuff we were doing that we were never really telling you but was kind of helping things move along, helping things function. Maybe we're just saying, like, I'm not going to do that anymore. But I wonder if that's something you have a sense of, where there's like a tension of companies being like, but wait, what? Because we've just been doing it and not really saying anything about it, or overworking and not really saying anything. And now we're raising our hand and like, actually, I'm really stressed and I can't do this anymore. And they're kind of surprised. Like, I didn't even know you were doing that.
Yeah. No, I think also what's happening is that the younger generation of workers, Gen Z in particular, they don't want to be so work focused. I mean, they don't want to spend, they don't even want to make friends at work, you know? So it's a different, and so as more Gen Zs come into the workplace, whereas like the millennials, the Gen Xers, the baby boomers, we were kind of used to working all the time and almost as a badge of honor, you know, and now it's not, I think it's a healthier environment now, though some of my, you know, best friends, you know, my longest, the people I've known the longest are from people I've met at work, you know? And so, I mean, so a part of me is like, oh, I hope that still happens. You know, I've met some really great people at work. And so, but it's healthier. People are learning to kind of take stock of how much they're working. And because I do think also, even though the pandemic is over, I mean, we're still dealing with the aftershocks of it all.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes, for sure. Samantha and I are certainly, I still sometimes feel like I'm in lockdown. It's just been a really difficult thing for me to get over. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And I do think a lot of this hidden work that was happening was women. And then when you bring in childcare or whatever that is, yeah, we're just sort of not wanting to do that anymore without saying, you know what? Something's got to give. Something's got to give.
And I'm wondering, like, if part of like understanding and being able to identify that, like, we are all or in similar boats, and then being able to acknowledge, oh, this is kind of a mistreatment from like corporations on us, this expectation that we should be okay, and as long as we're earning them money, then everything is fine. But social media has kind of brought to light, like, yeah, but is it really healthy for you? Are you getting anything out of this other than bringing money for them? And then you're losing focus on, like you said, being able to spend time with your family or being able to have time for yourself. And you're really starting to see, oh, in the end, it really doesn't like fold out for us, the individual, who are the ones that's suffering from burnout. And with that, still not seeing the end in sight, like feeling that again, like I said, this has become the new norm for so many of us, that we're like, okay, so what do we do? Because the corporations or our bosses, our businesses are not going to exactly help us find solutions for this. So what do we do to find a solution?
I mean, in certain industries, I do think employers want to, you know, help employees, you know, adjust to the new normal, whatever that is, because in certain sectors, there's a very low unemployment rate. I mean, it's hard to find good workers. It's hard to, and people want to keep good people. And so I think in some in the sectors that aren't, you know, they aren't doing a lot of layoffs, I mean, they want to do right by their employees. And I think also as a lot more women get into, and a lot of, you know, younger managers come up through the ranks, I think they're more mindful about mental health. And so I'm hoping that out of all of this, we build kind of a healthier workplace for everyone.
Right. Yeah. And again, like, social media really has brought to light, I'm like, hey, this is not supposed to be how it's supposed to be. And I think like podcasts in itself have given like a big platform, especially to have like your podcast, a series where we talk about, hey, these are the different types of burnouts. Let's talk about how this affects you. And then let's talk about how that looks not only in the business world, your personal world, and then let's find these possible solutions. In this conversation, do you feel like with your podcast and your series, this is like this is the platform for you to be able to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really write columns on this topic. I mean, that's what I love about the podcast is that it's allowed me to cover different topics and issues that I normally wouldn't get into. And it's been really, I feel like the podcast platform, this burnout topic has been really, it's been really effective, talking about it.
Have you heard from audiences or your listeners about this?
I have. Yeah, I have heard from audiences and listeners. And because I think everybody's gone through this. It's not like a tiny segment is feeling burned out. A lot of people felt burnt out during the pandemic and they don't know what to do. I mean, I think a lot of people are like me. Can I get back to my old self? Can I even remember it? Or does it even make sense anymore? I think where I landed was maybe it doesn't make sense for me to be my old self. The pandemic has changed me. It's not realistic. And so what is my new kind of happy medium? Like what does that look like?
One of the things that you talked about in the podcast that I'm really interested in, if you could give like a brief explanation. I love science, and you have an episode about the science of burnout, right?
They also had an episode on the science of happiness too, as well.
Oh, cool.
That was really interesting too. Yeah, I mean, I guess the science in that, this is with probably you're referring to the Harvard Medical School doctor Aditi Nurkar, and she has been on the forefront of studying the science of stress. I mean, she herself went through a burnt out or panic episode when she was a medical school student, and she suddenly, was working all these hours, and then she was exhausted and tired and she couldn't get out of bed. She felt like, I think she talked about, she felt like a stampede of horses were on her chest, and she went to see a doctor and did a battery of tests. And her doctor said to her, "Congratulations, it's just stress. And so just take some time off and, go to the spa, go on vacation." And she was so dissatisfied with that answer. That really inspired her to kind of study the science of stress. And she's like, and she wanted to become the doctor she wished she had seen. Someone could be like, okay, it is actually, there's something physical, there's something mental going on, and you need to address it. I mean, what I've also learned from others is that the idea is that you can't self-care your way out of stress. No number of spa visits or vacation days will take away your stress. You need to get at the root cause of your stress. You probably do need to say no more. You need to take more breaks during the day. You need more. Everyone talked about physical activity. Everyone talked about taking deep breaths. I was like, never heard so many people talk about you need to take more breaths, deep breaths. I was like, okay, and then also getting quiet. The power of quiet. That was the other thing I didn't think about, and I practice this a lot now, which is kind of because you're on social media, you have so much stuffed in your brain, you can't even think straight, right? And so you need time to just clear your mind. So sometimes when I walk the dog, I don't listen to a podcast because I need to clear my brain. Now when I'm in the car, I try not to turn on the radio or listen to a podcast. I just need moments, even minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes where there's just nothing, just me and my thoughts, and that's it. And so I feel like there is something to this whole, stress isn't just in our heads. I mean, we kind of need to, we almost need to think about it from almost a scientific manner, like dissecting it and picking it apart. It's just not in our head, and it's not just going to the spa,
Yes. We have talked about that numerous times on this podcast. Stress does have physical impacts on you. We joke about it a lot, but it can shorten your lifespan. It can impact your health. So it is something serious, and something we should look at scientifically and should investigate more, because as you said, we all experience it. Probably most of us have experienced burnout. So it would be nice to know Certainly for people like me, like here's your scientific reason. This is happening.
Well, I think I mean, for me, I thought was so interesting talking to all these experts is that it was almost like for example, like productivity and doing laundry, right? I was thinking, even Dr. Nurikar talked to me about laundry. She had, because she was saying that one of the scientific things that she talked about with me was about how only a lot of us pride ourselves in multitasking, right? We can, and the science shows that only 2% of us can actually truly multitask. We're actually not really multitasking. Was it task switching, right? And so Dr. Nurikar talked to me about we all need to be doing more monotasking, doing one thing at a time. So I said, how do you deal with laundry? And she says to me, she only does, she takes all her chores, her household chores, and she does it like Wednesday evening. And so now for me, I only do laundry on Wednesdays and the weekend. That's it. And I mean, yes, I sit around with piles of, laundry, not folded, clean, but not folded. I've got one upstairs right now. Yes. But they're clean. And they're
the laundry. A win is a win.
Exactly.
A win is a win.
Like this morning, my son was like, Mom, I don't have any shorts. I was like, oh, go look through that basket upstairs.
Go look at the clean pile. There's a clean pile.
There's a clean pile. Exactly. but I'm willing to, if that's the price I have to pay, it's okay, right? For my mental health.
A win is a win. I'm just saying.
Yes. Okay. This is so fascinating to me because I have started doing the quiet time before I even knew this, just naturally, because I've been so stressed. And I also have, this is when I do my chores.
Yes. So right. So I mean, some of the stuff I did already, but now you understand it, and then now you'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right. You'll be. That's what happened to me. It's like, oh yeah, like this is why I should keep at it or do things a certain way. This is why I need to. I knew that the phone, like now when I go to sleep at night, my phone is not in arm's reach. It is, halfway across the room in another room. And I also now when I wake up in the morning, I make sure. I used to just go on my computer right away, right? And now I was like, okay, the first half hour, 45 minutes, it's me time. I'm sitting on my deck. I'm, listening to the birds. I'm, watering the plants and my flowers and my basil plants, and so I'm just kind of, taking that time for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, Shirley, thank you so much for being here. You're officially a SMNTY friend.
This is great.
Yeah.
Yes. You're welcome back anytime if you're ever in Atlanta, if we're ever in Boston.
Yes.
And thank you for the free therapy.
A bill will be in the mail.
Yeah, you should get an invoice us.
Charge iHeart. Here we
go. Yes. Well, where can the good listeners find you?
You can find me. Well, it's called Say More. Just look up Say More Boston Globe or Say More with Shirley Leung, Leung. You can find us at globe.com/say more or wherever you find your podcasts. And if you guys are on X or whatever you call it now, I'm at Leung. I'm on LinkedIn as well. So, but yeah, I'm reachable.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and listeners, please go check all of that stuff out. If you would like to find us, listeners, you can. Our email is stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We also have a YouTube, a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.